Shalom Aleichem. Today we're going to learn the Sikha for Pashas Shlach and Chelik Yud Gimel. This is a very short Sikha Lefierach, but it's a Yesod HaYesodus in Avodas Hashem about a raw, perhaps of something that took place that's mentioned in the Chumash, how we don't seem to make a big fuss about it, not realizing that we don't make a big fuss, but in reality, everything that we do is because of that story. And that's why there might not even have to be about it. Just your action is an action because of that Ma'aseh Shahaya in the mentioned in the Chumash. And this is the beginning. Obviously, we're talking about Ma'aseh of Meraglim, the Ma'aseh of going into Eretz Yisrael, as we will describe. An interesting point. The Rebbe starts off by asking, or by stating, that the name of the parsha has to incorporate in the name the toichen pnimi of the whole parsha. And the Rebbe says this as if this is a fact, and it is a fact. But the Rebbe starts off by saying kvar duba kama pamim, and there is no mucker for this. The Rebbe himself is the mucker. The Rebbe quotes in the Hara 1, Shar Yichud Vamuna, that how important a name of an item it is. That's true, but the fact that a name of a parsha incorporates or in it is hidden all details of the parsha, that's a chiddush from the Rebbe. And the whole sikha will be to try to figure out how all the details of the parsha, all the details of the story of this sedra are hinted in the word shlach. Says the Rebbe, Ois Aleph, Kvar Duber Kama Pamim, it is explained many times, Shetoichno Yikri Shekol Sedra, the main point of each sedra, including Kol HaParshi Sheba, every sedra has many parshas, many stories, many halachas, many mitzvahs. All the parshas that are in the sedra, Merumez b'shem shehi nikra, has to be hinted in the name of the parsha, that the parsha, in the name of the sedra that it's called, al pi minig Yisrael asher teiruhu. Since it became a minig to call the sedra with a certain title, a certain name, in this case shlach, somewhere in shlach has to be hinted the points of throughout the whole parsha. So the same has to be said about our sedra and the kras b'shem shlach, which is called shlach. Mizeh, move on. From this, we have to understand, or it's understood, shel b'shem zeh, in this title, in this name of shlach, misbatas, it shows hanekuda ikra shel anyonim hamedubarim b'chol parshas besedra. Even though in this Sedra we have many, many different stories and many different mitzvahs, as the Rebbe will soon explain, yet if you got to condense it all into one word and see and find capsulize in one word what the whole parsha is all about, it's the word shlach. Says the Rebbe, v'tzarich lahavin, that I have to understand. Nekudas ha'inyan the shlach lecha anashim, the point where the Eibusha says to Moshe to send spies, send meraglim, Harehu rak sipur kairos b'nei Yisrael b'yosem b'midbar. If you think about it, that was a one-time event, that happened when the Yidden, a story that happened when the Yidden were traveling through the Midbar. B'loi mitzvah shenitztavu l'kaima. It's not anywhere. It's no real mitzvah from there because of what happened. We don't find any mitzvah connected to that. Ukayoytzeboy. So it seems to be a story that was a one-time event. However, b'parshiyos shebesedra zu, if you turn a couple of parshas in this own sedra, in the sedra of shlach, habois la'acharei sipur meraglim, which is mentioned and discussed after the story of the meraglim, over there, yesh b'hem mitzvah l'deiros. We do find different mitzvahs that apply for all the generations, even to today. Umagam, and especially haparsha shebesiyum sedra. If you go at the end of the sedra shlach, the last parsha, shehi mitzvah tzitzis. Over there discusses the mitzvah tzitzis. The mitzvah tzitzis is not a small mitzvah. The mitzvah tzitzis, he mitzvah kalalis. It's a very general mitzvah, hamevia, which fulfilling that mitzvah leads or brings lizchiras kol taryag mitzvahs. It reminds you all 613 mitzvahs. Kamosha Kasav, as the pasuk itself says, Ure isam oisoi, you look at the tzitzis, uzchartem as kol mitzvahs Hashem. Wow. So there is a mitzvah that's discussed in our parsha that really has a connection to the whole Torah. Yet that's not the name of the parsha. That is not what we stress by calling it tzitzis or something like that. The name of the parsha is Shalach, which talks about the Meraglim, which the Meraglim was a one-time event. Is Eichi Tochin, how does it make sense? Sha'inyan the Shalach Lecha Anashim, the point that in the beginning of the Seder it speaks about where Hashem tells Moshe to send Meraglim, She'eino Yela Sipur Devarim, which seems to be only a story with no lesson attached to it, no mitzvah attached to it, should be more important than the mitzvahs in this Shebes Sedra. Koilo, even greater mitzvah tzitzis, even greater. You're not calling the title of the parsha something about tzitzis. Hakelelas as kol tayag mitzvahs. You overlook that and you call it shlach. Va'av shebeshem zeh va'ad, and until shebeshem zeh shlach mitzbatas on the kuda ikra shekol hasedra. You call, as mentioned before, because the parsha is called by that name, it means, despite the fact there might be some very great halachas or mitzvahs discussed here, if you really want to know what the Seder is all about, it's about the shlach, about the story. Where is the Hayra L'Ram? Why is the story so important? So in the Aras 3, the Rebbe says, obviously, the Torah chooses certain stories to write in the Torah. And the obvious lesson is that every story, every sipur that's in the Torah is obviously a Hayra. So there must be something to learn from this sipur of the Meraglim. So obviously, maybe that would be the reason why we call the Sedra with Shlach. Says the Rebbe, Mikol Mokim, nevertheless, you can't compare something which is written in the Torah in a way of a story to something which is written directly as a mitzvah. Obviously, the mitzvah has a much higher standard, and if so, the mitzvah, call the name of the parsha with one of the mitzvahs of the Sedra, or at least tzitzis, which is kol mitzvahs. Says the Rebbe, even if you're going to come and tell me that the simple reason why he uses the word shlach as the title of the Sedra, because this is a word that's right in the beginning of the Sedra, v'chol hasedra and the kras al shem haschalasa, and you will tell me, okay, that we used one of the words of the opening statements, and that becomes the title for the rest of the Sedra, whereas tzitzis or the mitzvahs are deep into the Sedra. Says the Rebbe, Harei, afim aschalasa hisibas Hashem, even if that's the reason he uses the word shlach, because it's towards the opening words of the beginning of the Sedra, mikol mokim, nevertheless, mikibun shazel shem al pi, since bashgacha paratis, it became the name, Harei Hashem moira al toichen kol hasedra. It must be, and not by chance, that the fact that it became the name of the Sedra, somehow in the word shlach, it capsulizes the whole Sedra in this word. And the obvious question is how? Says the Rebbe in Ha'is Beis, V'yuven zeh, you'll understand this by haktim bir b'mahus chet meraglim. You'll understand this by first analyzing what was so wrong, what was the harsh sin that the Meraglim did. And because of the Meraglim, the Yidden were stuck in the Midbar and they all had to die out. What did they do wrong? B'pashtus chatu, bazeh, you think a simple reason is that they sinned, shebo v'sipru, because they came back and they said, Ki az ha'om ha'yoshev ba'aretz, the people who live in the city, in Israel, are very mighty, very strong. V'arim b'tzures gedolos ma'od, and the mountains are very, it will be very hard to conquer the mountains because they're very fortified. V'gam yolidei ha'anok re'inu sham, and we saw giants there. So in other words, they reported facts that were problematic. I don't understand what's wrong with what they reported. They were sent for that purpose as a spies to see what's the land all about. And what are the people there all about? Are they strong? Are they weak? And how about the mountains over there? Are they fortified? Are they easy to get to? And if this was the instructions that they were given to find out, and the response to their request, hey Shivu, they said, okay, here is our report. Ki aza'am, the people there are very strong. Is v'lama yechashav zel lechet? Why would this be considered a sin? Harei adarabba, on the contrary, bazem milu es tafkidam, they actually fulfilled their mission, lasur asaretz. They were given a mission, and they actually did a perfect job. They came back with a clear report. So why are they considered evil for what they did? Vabir, and the explanation is, Moshe Rabbeinu sent them as spies, not to tell us, not to come back and say they're very strong, or that Moshe Rabbeinu sent them, Lihivoda, please find out, Be'eze derech va'ofen kal yoser lichbeshas Eretz Yisrael. He told them, in other words, what's happening is Moshe is really telling them, we are going. Hashem told us to go. No questions. But let's do it as natural as possible. Please go spy out the place. What's the easiest way to conquer it? The Eza Mokeng, through which place, Kedai Yoser Lahaschil Kibush, through which route is it easier to start the conquering of Eretz Yisrael? B'derech HaTeva, to do things in the most natural way. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu send spies? Obviously, if the Eibusha says, why don't you just go as is? Says the Rebbe in the brackets, Ki mekivon, since Shalai Avil HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nisim Magana, Hashem does not make nisim, miracles, for no reason. Even if situations could be taken care of naturally, there is no reason why Hashem should have to draw or send a miracle. Hashem does not make miracles when it's not needed. So because miracles don't happen when it's not needed, every person has to put in every effort. Even if the outcome, by the end, he will also have to depend on a miracle. But at least he has to put in effort. Lasa satoli boy, at least do what you are able to do. B'derech hateva, in the most natural way. Ulamait es misbar hanisim, to decrease that. If one miracle is needed, fine. The less miracles you could demand for, or the less miracles you could rely on, the better it is, because the more natural the thing becomes, the more that's how the Eibishter wants it. Ulamait es mispar anisim, to decrease the amount of miracles, or yes proteanes, or the details of each miracle, at kama she'efsher, as much as you're able to. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Meraglim to do. We are going. Just tell us the most natural way to be able to have a chance to win. Avo, however, Batuach hoya Moshe sheyalu v'yichbeshu. Moshe had no question. Moshe was sure that the Jews are going to end up going into Eretz Yisrael and conquering it. That wasn't the reason he's sending them. Why was he so sure? Ki kain tziva Hashem, because that's what Hashem commanded. So all he asked the Meraglim to do is to survey what would be the best way to go. Ulam, however, HaMeraglim, these Meraglim, when they came back, and they did do their survey, and they did come back, here is strong, here is not strong. If they would have stopped there, it wouldn't be so bad. They added some extra words. Acharesha Sipru, after they told Moshe, Al Derech how the people are there, Ve'orim, and how the mountains are situated, Ve'oretz, and how the land looks like, Hoisifu, they added something extra, Ve'isiku Maskana, and they proclaimed and they announced a final thought. What was their final thought that they did on their own? Because of what we see, we don't think we'll be able to win them. Ki chazaku mimenu, they are much stronger than us. Hainu, in other words, since naturally, when they put on the natural glasses, they couldn't understand, they couldn't believe how the Yiddish nation would be able to conquer Eretz Yisrael, because of they only depended on their derech hateva glasses, their derech hateva view. Heisiku, they came to a conclusion. We can't win. We won't be able to conquer it. Despite that, they know that the Eibishter says we will. That is their sin. Says the Rebbe, Al Pizah, based on this. Move on. Now I could tell you what this is a lesson for. Not only as a one-time story back then, this is a lesson for me and you thousands of years later. The lesson that we can learn from the story of the Meraglim, this is a lesson that's not a story. It's not a lesson that happened back then, only for the people back then. It's a lesson for everyone, everywhere, and any day in every action you do for Hashem. Klolos HaTorah mitzvahs. How klolos? Yesoid ikri. There's a strong fundamental point. Bekiyim kol mitzvahs. Who, when a person is about to fulfill mitzvahs, the foundation that every yid has to have is hayediyah, is the knowledge. You have to start with this, knowing because every mitzvah is a tzivui that Hashem wants, it's a tzivui that Hashem commanded. You got to start with the fact, if Hashem commanded us to do it, it is clear as day that we're able to do it. That's not a question. That's the mistake the Meraglim did. The Meraglim went, and due to the turbulence, to the harsh difficulties that were there, we can't. No. If the Eibishter says you could do it, why? If Hashem asked us to do it, He gave us the strength to be able to do it. And in the Rebbe, in the Ha'ara 8, the Rebbe says how far these Meraglim fell. The Meraglim, this is after Matan Torah, right? The Yidden left Mitzrayim, then there was Matan Torah, a month and a half later, and then started the whole thing with the Meraglim. What happened right before Matan Torah is the Yidden said, Na'aseh v'nishma. Na'aseh v'nishma means, whatever it is we're going to do. Na'aseh, we're going to do, even, and then only v'nishma. It's a sense of commitment to the Eibishter, like Mesiras Nefesh. Yeah, do I understand? Don't I understand? I'm doing it anyways. These same Meraglim, these same people who originally, a couple of months ago, just said Na'aseh v'nishma, have fallen, and when came time of action, and they were told to go, and they were told that the Eibishter says you're going to do it, It wasn't Nasa v'nishma. It wasn't Nasa. It was Nishma. They heard what they saw, and they came to a different conclusion that we cannot do it. And that's the lesson for us, that be careful. We all were there by Nasa v'nishma. If the Meraglim fell after the Nasa v'nishma, we have to make sure that our Nasa v'nishma stays strong, that as long as we know that every mitzvah is a commandment from the Eibishter, yes, you can. V'harei, back in the second paragraph in the Ois Gimel, v'harei, gam b'asav adam, even a human, imrak b'das yadaber, if he only talks sense, lo yitzava lases davar, in yadeya she'ein b'yacheles ha-mitzvah l'kaimoi. No normal, intelligent person will instruct or demand someone to do something for him when he knows that's impossible for that person to do it. Ubefrat, and especially, im hatzivui ba me adam she'asar semitzava. Kumoi uman ha'asar mitzvah. Kumoi uman ha'isa kli. Shebevadai isa isai be'ofen sheyuchel l'malis hatafkid asher b'shviloi nasa. Especially if the commandment is coming from the one who made the whole situation, like the uman, like a professional, a pot maker who makes a keli, or a carpenter that builds something. Because he built that item, he built it in such a way it should be able to be used in a certain way. And if he tells you it could be used in a certain way, it definitely will. So if the Eibishter builds us, creates us, he is our creator for a purpose, and he tells us it's to be used for this and this things, obviously we have the powers to do it. Madach by a basar v'dam, it makes sense. How much more so by the King of Kings, the Eibishter, which is the ultimate good and justice. Of course, shela yidresh me'hamitzuva davar she'ein b'koichei. He obviously will not demand from the person who he's demanding from, which he himself made. He will not ask him to do something that's not, that he doesn't have within his powers to do. Koyach shenasam by lekaimoi, v'arei etzloi lo shayach has v'shalom taz becheshben. By a physical person, by a human person, you could say he created a situation and he thought that according to his calculations it should work out, but maybe he made a mistake. By the Eibishter, there is no mistake. If he created us in the way that it should be able to be done, we obviously can do it. Ella, nevertheless, even though we start off with this knowledge, with this commitment, that we for sure are able, there is nothing that could stop a yid from doing a mitzvah. Nevertheless, even by the commitment to fulfill a mitzvah, we should not rely on miracles, because it wasn't given to us in a way that we have to depend on a miracle to make it. On the contrary, Inyan ikri b'mitzvahs, a main point in fulfilling mitzvahs is hulakaima b'derech hateva, to fulfill. Since the main point of the mitzvah is to create the dwelling place for Hashem, b'tachtonim, it means in the lower world. The lower world meaning in nature. B'meila tzarech liyas kiyumim b'darkei hateva dafka. So if you want to give the Eibishter a dwelling place in nature, you have to do the mitzvah with nature. So the nature of the world itself, Ye'asa l'dira le'yizbarach. Nature should become his dwelling place. V'lachein, tzarech liyeh shlach. Therefore, we have to do every time a mitzvah comes up to you, and it's a time you have to perform a mitzvah. You have to send spies. You have to do things like shlach, v'yasuru, to survey how is the best way for me to fulfill the mitzvah in the most natural way. B'chdei la, so you should know be'eza ofen after l'kayim es a mitzvah, the olei nala b'derech hateva. In the time of the Meraglim, the mitzvah was olei nala. We're going to Eretz Yisrael. We are going. Now, how do we make sure it's as natural as possible? Me and you, in our time, every other mitzvah. The mitzvah has to happen. What's the best way? Al pi teva, we can't wait for miracles to happen. And in Ahor 11, the Rebbe brings the famous story that the Alter Rebbe did not want to be Mekadesh the Levana unless the boat that was that he was on stopped by itself, because then it was a way of a nes. He wants to perform the mitzvah al pi derech hateva. Dalid, says the Rebbe, v'hine, if so, b'kivan shayera zu shayachas u'mechrachas b'chol mitzvahs, since this lesson of shlach, of finding out in every mitzvah what's the best way to do it, what's the most natural way to do it, but I am doing it, and that's a commitment you have to have in every single mitzvah. Therefore, this lesson is specifically taught to us in the case of entering Eretz Yisrael. It could have been taught to us in many other ways, that you have to have the commitment, I'm doing it, and find it in the most natural way. But why specifically about entering Eretz Yisrael? From there we learn the Seirah. Says the Rebbe, B'fisha knisa l'Eretz Yisrael, because going into Eretz Yisrael, hu inyan kloli b'chol mitzvahs klulam. That is a general point, a general avodah, that it's applicable to any time you're about to fulfill a mitzvah. Somehow it connects to a yid entering Eretz Yisrael. And just like over there we were taught this lesson, every time a person does a mitzvah, he's entering Eretz Yisrael. What does that mean? V'abir bazar. The explanation is like this. Toichen umaylas Eretz Yisrael, the advantage, the plus, the beauty of Eretz Yisrael, mevur b'kasav. What's so special about Eretz Yisrael? It's clearly mentioned in the pasuk. Eretz asher einei Hashem alekecha ba, meireshis hashanavad achris shana. It is the time that Hashem's eyes, it is the place, Eretz is the place that Hashem's eyes are focused from beginning of the year to end of the year. What does that mean? What does that tell us? Eretz Yisrael is special. Hainu Shabbat ha'ashgocha ha'elyoina hi ba'ofen pnimi v'golui. The way Hashem is mashgiach, is connected, or supervisors are involved with that land, is a much deeper and much more revealed way. Yoisem b'shara ha'aratzes. More than other lands. You might not feel Hashem's presence in other lands, but in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem is directly focused on Eretz Yisrael all year round. Zoisem Eretz, in other words, Sheba Eretz HaKodesh, Gam Bahagashmi Sheba Eretz, even in Eretz Yisrael, even in the physical part of Eretz Yisrael, the Inyanah, and all the physicality, all the physical things in Eretz Yisrael, somehow, Nirgash Alikusa Yizbarech, you could feel godliness Begila Yoiser. Not in Shul. In Shul, you could feel godliness anywhere in the world. Even the Gashmis of the land of Eretz Yisrael, somehow you feel more Eibishter there than anywhere else. Al Pizem, move on. Based on this, it's understood. Sham Shachas Kedusha Gluya. Anytime a person wants to draw down, wants to be Mamshich Kedusha, reveal Kedusha, which is Elikus, Anytime a person is being mamshich godliness, be'inyan v'dover gashmi, into any physical thing. Now, a minute ago we were speaking about in Eretz Yisrael, even the land of Eretz Yisrael, the Gashmias Eretz Yisrael, there is this kedusha. So says the Rebbe. So if you live out of Eretz Yisrael, there is also a part of this behavior. How? Every time out of Eretz Yisrael, a Yid does a mitzvah with a davar gashmi, he's taking the gashmi and he's being mamshich kedusha in there. In other words, he's bringing what Eretz Yisrael has. He's bringing Eretz Yisrael into every mitzvah, wherever, whenever. Harezeh bedugmas knisas hadavar va'apula va'adam va'apoyel Eretz Yisrael. Every time a Yid does a mitzvah with a davar gashmi anywhere, it's similar to what's going on in Israel, that the gashmi is holy, is more revealed as kedusha. Zoyse meres, meaning to say, Shakiyim kol mitzvah u'mitzvah hu bedugmas knisa l'Eretz Yisrael. Every fulfillment of any mitzvah anywhere is very similar to Yidden going to Eretz Yisrael. In what sense? Ki kiyum ha-mitzvahs hu kanal. Because every time a Yid does a mitzvah, it has the same point, hamshachas elikus b'inyanim agashmin, that we draw down godliness into any gashmius thing that we're using for the mitzvah. That we create wherever we are a dwelling place for the Eibishter, because we were mamshich kedusha in that Eretz Yisrael, in that gashmius. And the Rebbe brings in the Ara 15, mach da Eretz Yisrael, da anywhere you may be, you could be mamshich what Eretz Yisrael stands for. Eretz Yisrael stands for Gili Kedusha. You could bring that into any gashmis. There is a fascinating Ha'ara 14, where the Rebbe asks a question. Now that you just told me how by every mitzvah there is a part of entering Eretz Yisrael because you're being mamshich kedusha and gashmis, says the Rebbe, based on this thought, you could answer a shvera shaila. Why is it that every day we have the sheish schiros, things that we have to remember, we have to say and remember? You have to remember Yetziras Mitzrayim b'chol yom. You have to remember that we left Mitzrayim. That's one of the schiros. You have to remember that the Eibishter gave us the Torah. We also remember in davening by saying Az Yashir. We also remember Kriyas Yamsuf. Says the Rebbe, you're remembering everything around the same period of time, leaving Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, and Matan Torah, and there is no mitzvah to remember the climax of all this. What follows up? Why did the Eibishter take us out of Mitzrayim? To give us the Torah, and then it was to Hoitzeisi v'ga'alti v'lokachti. I will take you into Eretz Yisrael and build the Beis Hamikdash, l'chaper kol avaneseinu, as we say in the Haggadah and all that. So why not also make it a part of the things that we have to remember, is to remember also the mitzvah of going to Eretz Yisrael. And for the Rebbe, I don't have to remember that. Because just by the very fact a Yid does a mitzvah, every time you do a mitzvah, you're entering the action is the remembrance. The action of fulfilling a mitzvah is remembering Yetziras Mitzrayim, remembering Knisa Eretz Yisrael, because I'm doing what the Yidden did back then when they went to Eretz Yisrael. What every Yid in Eretz Yisrael does, feels the Kedusha and Gashmias, I feel it every time I do a mitzvah. So there's no point, dafka, to remember it, to utter it, whereas the other ones, you have to utter it to remember it. A very geshmak ha'ara 14. Back to the Sicha Ois Hey. Hayra Klaus Neisefes. You could learn another general lesson, Hashayachat l'chol mitzvahs, which is also important to every mitzvah. B'shalach v'yosuras eretz Canaan. That you could learn out from the fact that the Eibishter sent spies, and the Eibishter said we should send spies and survey what's the best way to conquer Eretz Yisrael. Says the Rebbe, koydem kol mitzvah o mitzvah, before a yid does any mitzvah, ala adam le'izboinen b'toichin a mitzvah she'omed l'kayim. He has to stop for a second and think, what exactly is the point of the mitzvah I'm about to fulfill? What am I trying to accomplish? And it's not only he has to think about the detailed mitzvah that he's unique in this and every situation that he's doing. Elagam, he also has to think at the same time, you also have to think, I know I'm going to be doing this mitzvah for this and this reason, but let me think about the mitzvahs in general. What is the point of me fulfilling a mitzvah? What is the point of every time a yid fulfills a mitzvah? And it's by every mitzvah. I am now fulfilling Hashem's will. That's point number one. Point number two is the details of his will. And it's mentioned in any time you make a bracha before you perform a mitzvah, you say Asher Kiddushanu, Hashem made us holy, b'mitzvayso v'tzivanu, and He commanded us. Shaydei kiyumei sa mitzvah, when a yid fulfills the mitzvah, nasa kodesh, he becomes holy. Umekayim hu mashitziva isei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he fulfills what Hashem commanded him. V'al yedei zeh, and by fulfilling what Hashem asked you to do, misached imoy, it makes you one with Hashem. Where do you see this in the words of the bracha? Because zel loshen kiddushanu, this is where Hashem, we say in the bracha, Hashem made us holy. V'loshen mitzvah, miloshen tzavsa v'chiba. Mitzvah means commandment. Mitzvah also means to connect. By making us holy, and we do our mitzvahs, we connect with Hashem. Ubracha zu, and this bracha that we make when we do a mitzvah, nevarchim lifnei kiyum a mitzvah. That's most of the brachas we make even before we actually do the action of the mitzvah. Over la'asiyasem. Lahayros, because that tells us, shelifnei asiyas a mitzvah, even before the yid does a mitzvah, ala adam leizboinem betoichin of a gavana klali shal kol mitzvahs. A person has to have his mindset and know, what exactly am I doing? Why am I doing this? Because this is Hashem's will, and I want to connect to Hashem. So just as it is in every mitzvah, it will also apply in the mitzvah of studying Torah. You have to make you're not supposed to learn Torah unless you make a bracha first. The bracha you have to make even before you start learning Torah. What's the bracha that you make? Asher bacha banim we call Amim, the Eibushter chose us from all nations. V'nasan lanu es Torah soy. He gave us His Torah. Zoy semeres, in other words, Shakadosh Baruch Hu nasan lo es Torah k'moshe Torah soy. Hashem gave us Torah that's Torah soy. As the same Torah that's His, etzlo yisbarach, that's by Him, He gave it to us. V'choismim, and you conclude the bracha, noisein Torah. That Hashem is giving the Torah. Lashon haiva, presently. He didn't give it thousands of years ago and let it go. Every day He gives us the Torah. Ki b'chol yom yu beinecha chadashim. Every day a yid has to feel as if it's anew, the receiving of the Torah. Even though he feels that, all this a person has to think before he starts learning. I am learning Hashem's Torah that He gave me, and He's giving me. This is the second lesson, how a yid has to spy, how a yid has to act similar to the Meraglim, how they were spies for Eretz Canaan. Hanemar b'turachana l'knisa l'Eretz Yisrael. Originally, that was something that had to be done before we go into Eretz Yisrael. The same similarity has to be before we do a mitzvah, before we make Eretz Yisrael. L'fnei kiyum mitzvah tzarich ha'adam lasur. A person has to spy out ul'hizbainen and to think about benyana. Think about, what am I doing? How am I doing this? v'kavanasa v'tachlisa shel ha'Torah v'mitzvah shaba lilmei l'kayim. It shouldn't just happen. Just like the Yidden were about to do the mitzvah of Knesset Eretz Yisrael, you have to do everything to figure it out in the best way before you do a mitzvah. Before you learn, there has to be this dedication. What is happening now? Al pizeh move on. Based on this, it's understood. How the point that we learn from this shlach, in our parsha, the Eibusha said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you go and send shluchim. You send the spy. So just as it was back then, Moshe was the one that did the shlach. Al derech zeh bechinas Moshe Rabbeinu shebechol nefesh v'nefesh b'beis Yisrael. So we all have a Moshe Rabbeinu within us. So that Moshe Rabbeinu within us tells us, do your survey, do your dedication. He and the kuda hayisoida techol parshiyas hasedra. This is the main point, perhaps the most important point in the whole sedra. Shakulon nikra shlach, because the whole sedra, all the mitzvahs further on, are all included in the name shlach. V'lo not only they're all called shlach, ela shenemra b'tchilas hasedra. This point is mentioned in the beginning of the sedra. Koydem shenemra atzivuim sheba. Even before you tell us, it tells us the mitzvahs what to do. Because even before you know what to do, you have to understand why you're doing, how it, what it's all about. Ki hayrois hanal hanilmades misipur shliach meraglim, because these lessons that we learn from how the Eibishter Moshe Rabbeinu sent the meraglim, bois kagdam of yisoid l'chol mitzvahs. They are also an introduction, a foundation, how every Yid should perform any mitzvah. Oizvav. However, based on this beautiful explanation, you have to understand since we just explained how these are very fundamental points, how a person should serve a Eibishter by limud Torah, by kiyum mitzvahs, that there has to be this hachana, this spying. Isn't this something which is mandatory? Is Volamba Tala Kadosh Baruch Hu in Yizeh B'daiter Tzarna Shel Moshe Rabbeinu Moshe? Why did if it's something that's mandatory, and only with that the mitzvah, the limud is done properly? Why did the Eibishter say to Moshe, "It's up to you if you want to send meraglim"? But Amrei, when the Eibishter says to Moshe, "Shlach lecha ledaitcha," it's all however you like. I'm not telling you to send im tirtza. If you want, shlach. So if it's such an important point, why was it even a svara? Why was it dependent on Moshe's decision? Should I send a spy or not? For Yuvan, this will be understood. Based on what we explained already before. Shetachlis kim Torah mitzvahs. The point why the Eibishter wants us to fulfill Torah mitzvahs, he lahamshich elikus binyanim agashmim, because Hashem wants us to bring down elikus, godliness, into gashmias. As it's worded in the Medrash, when the Medrash describes what happened when the Eibishter gave the Yidden the Torah, tachtoinim yalu le'elyonim. What seems to be below, what seems to be physical, have now the power to be elevated to Elyonim. That is the reason why the Eibishter created the world. That's the reason why the Eibishter gives us Torah mitzvahs, so we should be able to purify the Gashmias. V'hine, says the Rebbe, Hachiluk shebein Elyon, the nidin the dan, l'tachton, the differences between what's above and what's below, Bein boire kevayachol linivra, the difference between the Creator, Hashem, and what was created, the difference is very big, right? The real difference is sheboire, in a different way, the Creator who bechinas mashpia. The Creator is the giver. He created. V'nivra, and the one who was created, hu bechinas mekabel. He's the receiver. Hanivra mitzad atzmoi ein leko metzias klal. The one that was created, he in his own essence, he's nothing. V'hu mekabel kol metziusoi mehaboirei. His whole existence is here because he was created. The boirei, the Eibishter, made him. So v'hayois she'inya matna Torah v'mitzvos. And since we mentioned before that the main reason or the point, the goal, the mission of Matan Torah was shahatachton yisala lebchinas elyon, that the lower level should get elevated to a higher level, kivayachol. So, excuse me, if the lower level has no input, has no say, and it's only here because the Boire created him, there is no elevation. If he has no input, if the Tachton, the thing that was created, just goes with the flow because that's how he was created, how are you elevating him? He did what he was created for, and the way he is created. If you give him a chance, and you give him opportunity, and you give him freedom to make his own decisions, and yet he chooses to do the right thing, now he's a Tachton that becomes elevated to Elyon. Hare move on. Toichen aliyah zu shatachton yisala liyas bechinas mashpia k'moya Elyon. Says the Rebbe, not only we want him to be elevated, we want him to be elevated in such a way that he could reach, at least in a minor level, to be a mashpia too, just like the Boirei. U'k'mayim Razal, as Chazal tell us, that when Yidden do certain things, Nasa shutav lakadosh baruch hu b'maaseh bereishis, we become partners with the Eibishter in creation of the world. What is a partner? In other words, we have certain things that we're equal rights. Shehu bechinas mashbiach kavayachol b'maaseh bereishis. Just like the Eibishter is the Boirei, just like the Eibishter is the mashbiach in Maaseh bereishis, we become partners, and the Yid also has some koyach of being a mashbiach. We find the Chazal tell us, there's different stories in Chazal where there was a debate, and the Eibush just smiles and says, Natschuni bonei, Natschuni bonei, that the Bezdin Shalamata, the Tanoim, the Lamata, they won, they were right. That is really what real partnership means. When there are two partners, sometimes this partner wins, the Yisrael Maisifim Mashpiyim Batayra. When a Yid learns Torah or does the right thing, he's not only a follower, he's actually he's being Maisif and Mashpiyah in the Torah. If that's true, move on. Based on this, we can understand these points that we say, that everything we do, we have to send spies, and we have to survey, and we have to investigate. That was not said as a commandment, it must be done. Even as mentioned, it must be done, but we gave you the choice to decide. Because when a Yid fulfills the Eibishter's commandments, even though that through fulfilling the commandment he will be elevated, he will still not ever reach the level that he was meant to reach. He will not reach the level to elevate himself to be an Elyon, to be a partner, that he should too be a Mashbiah. Why? Sharei sof, because ultimately, if you didn't give him his personal input, if you just commanded him to do it, Einei Elam Mekayim Tzivui. Shazel Nisinas Koyach Me'aboirei. He's doing it because he was commanded. Zoisei Meres. In other words, Shadayin Hu Miksosim Mekabo Me'aboirei. He's still doing it because he's still the receiver of the Boirei. There is no part that he put into this. However, if it was your decision, You had a choice to do or not to do, and you chose to do it. Where he fulfills it by himself, through himself. Then he can elevate himself to be partners and do what Hashem does. Hashem is the mashpia. He can also become, in a minor way, a mashpia. Now we can understand even deeper why this story of the Meraglim comes in the Sedra even before the mitzvahs. Because not only the concept of the Meraglim is a general lesson on the guys of Chol Inya Torah mitzvahs, which is relevant to any fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. Elagam ha'oifen shaboy bo'oiros, the way it was taught to us, melame tachlis hakavonas, the Torah mitzvahs, that tells us that what the ultimate goal, the mission statement in every Yid's life, that tachtoinim yalu le'elyoinim, that we down here, wherever, a gashmistic person in Chutz La'aretz could elevate himself by fulfilling the mitzvahs, that he could become an elyoin, and he could become a mashpia.